Welcome back to another lesson with me, Mr. B. Today, we're going to learn about how this class operates using a blended learning, self-paced, and mastery-based teaching model. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to describe what a modern classroom is and how my English class will operate. We're going to look at how our routine is structured from the daily check-in and learn how the teaching model is broken down and looks on Google Classroom. Then, what are mastery checks and how revision and grading works in this class. So what is going on every day? There's going to be a check-in known as vibe check. At the start of each class, you're going to move your magnetic name tag on the whiteboard into one of the columns ranging from 0 to 5. 0 being, "This ain't it, Mr. B," or "I need a mindfulness mental health moment." 1 being, "I need help. Can we check in?" Or 5 being, "I'm ready to go and put in work." Once you're seated, you'll either find a QR code to scan the check-in Google form, or you'll find the Google form link on Google Classroom. The daily check-in looks like this. You'll enter your first and last name, signify what period you're in, tell me what you're working on today. So maybe you're going to revise work from Mr. B's feedback, review some materials, and approach redoing the mastery check. And then we can type in mastery check 1. And then if you selected other, for example, because you're ahead of pace maybe, you can specify what you're working on. I'm working on prob stats today. Or if you are revising mastery check 1, you then let me know what your goal is for today. So my goal for today is to fix mastery check 1 and move to lesson 6. And if you didn't do the vibe check, how are you feeling today? You can let me know on this Google form if you didn't feel like letting folks know that you needed a mental health break or a mindfulness break because you put a 0, or that maybe you didn't want folks to know that you want to check in with me when you put a number 1. And then there's classwork. So depending where you are in the lesson or unit, you're going to be watching a video or reading and taking notes. You might be completing a practice lesson or assignment that ultimately leads to a mastery check, or you might be revising any of your work based off of the feedback that I gave you. This table here is the public progress tracker that you'll see projected as soon as you walk in class. Here you're going to find your name in one of the following columns: behind pace, on pace, ahead of pace, revise, or even done for completed a unit. I want to be clear that this tracker is non-evaluative, meaning it doesn't reflect your grade. Rather, it's just a simple way for you to see where you are in the unit, where you are for the day. Also, it's a great way to look at who you can collaborate with. So let's pretend that I'm Kate and I'm ahead of pace right over here. And I'm kind of confused on lesson 6, but Mr. B is busy helping Derek revise lesson 1 because he's pretty behind pace. So I see on the tracker that Luis is actually on lesson 6. So maybe I'll go ask him for help and then wait for Mr. B to be done helping Derek. And that's one useful way to use this pacing tracker. You get to see where folks are and ask other folks for help. Ideally, the tracker is going to be updated at the beginning of every class period. So this teaching model is broken down into 3 parts. There's blended instruction, self-pacing, and a mastery-based grading system. Blended instruction is where you're going to watch teacher-created videos like this one, and then you'll be able to learn at your own pace within the deadlines of the unit. And later we'll look at a unit tracker, how that works, and how that's going to guide you along the way. Lastly, this class is based on mastering content versus the traditional method of learning where, one day you learn one thing from the lecture and then you move on from the topic or you take a test. And regardless of the grade you get, we're going on to the next unit. So in this class, we're focused on making sure you fully understand what it is before moving on. So the parts of each lesson. With the instructional videos, these are only a part of the lesson. Oftentimes, assignments are paired with readings to dive deeper into the content, where you'll need to take notes, whether that's the guided notes that I create or your own note-taking structure that you use. In practice assignments, lessons could also have guided questions for practice for you to complete and hone your skills. And sometimes in these practice assignments, like I mentioned with the pacing tracker earlier, you can look back and collaborate with a classmate. Then lastly, there's the mastery check. Once you've completed previous practice lessons, you may attempt a mastery check. Usually these will be individual assessments, unless stated otherwise, where you have to follow instructions to show mastery over the content that you just learned. And if you're successful, you'll move on to the next lesson. But if you're not, you're gonna revise by reviewing your notes and the practice assignments, and then you can give it another shot, try again, and improve your grade. It starts off with instructional videos, reading and annotating, and then moving on to practice, like with a guided question. After a few of those, there might be a mastery check, and then that's when we check for your understanding. If you really learned what's going on, before you can move on, based off of how you do, you either move on to the next lesson, or I provide you some feedback and you revise and try again to improve your grade. So let's take a look at what my assignments will look like on Google Classroom. Practice assignments. Often these lessons will have a guided question based on an assigned reading and specific instructions related to the materials. So if we look here, we see it's lesson 1, what makes American literature? And so in the instructions, it says you must complete the following steps before moving on to the next lesson. Watch the instructional video, which is right here, and choose one of the following: read only, listen only, or listen and read along. Each of these lessons might have a reading. Here's the PDF over here. And oftentimes I actually do have an audio recording, or I like to call them mixtapes, where I'm breaking down the reading if there are parts that don't necessarily make sense to you, but I often think they're important and help you make sense of them. Then it says you're going to write a response to the discussion question after watching the video and reading or listening to the PDF or mixtape. Remember earlier I said that instructional videos are only part of the lesson, not the entire lesson. And as you're watching that video, if you want to follow along, you can click on the attached slides here. Sometimes they might be on Nearpod, sometimes they'll be on Google Slides, depending on what it is and the way I want you to engage with the lesson. There might be some ways to interact by answering a question via Nearpod or Edpuzzle. That's not just this Google Classroom question task. So this is all available to you in each assignment, so that way you have full access to the content as you're reviewing or learning through the unit. So grading in this class. All assignments in this class are worth 10 points, except for mastery checks, which will be worth 50 points, and then essays and projects will be worth out of 100 points. So missing or not completing a mastery check can really affect your grade. So mastery check number 1 over here has a written prompt based on a reading that we did about master and counter narratives and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk on the danger of a single story. And then the second bullet point also asks you to think and describe of an example of how you've seen the master and counter narrative in the world around you. So in history, news, media, movies, books. So unlike the practice assignment that we just saw, where it was asking like, what is American literature, where there's kind of a guided question, the mastery checks are designed to test your abilities and show your understanding outside of any content that I give you, outside of the readings, outside of the videos that I create. They ask you to apply yourself and make connections to the world around you. Some units might have a hyperdoc of guided notes to assist you through all of the vocabulary or critical concepts that we're going to learn. Not every unit will have one, but if there is, you'll have access to it and I'll share it with you. So Google Classroom will have all the video and practice assignments listed under the Classwork tab. And they're going to look like this, where it's going to have the unit title over here. And then you're going to have each of these assignments that you need to do in order, starting from lesson 2 to lesson 3, lesson 4, and then so on. And if you get lost or confused, you can refer back to the instructional video or the instructions in the assignment as we saw earlier. I would also highly encourage that you ask a friend for help before you come to me. The whole point of this class is to collaborate with your peers, and you can learn just as much from them before you come to me, especially if I'm helping someone else. Like we saw with the pacing tracker, you may actually need to ask a friend for help before you come to me because I'm helping someone revise their work. And Google Classroom will post these assignments in reverse chronological order. So it's going to go from the most recent to the oldest assignment. So one thing I want to make clear is that I'm not your secretary. Nothing against secretaries or assistants because they're extremely helpful, but I'm your teacher. I'm not your parent. I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not your assistant. There's a reason that self-pacing is implemented in this class. It's for you to practice learning how to take control of your education and how you learn, which is why I created this unit tracker to help guide you as even like a little game board, as some teachers call it, to check off and see where we're headed next. So maybe you finished lesson 1 with self-care and purpose, and then you finished listening to the podcast on mental health. And now it's time to start your Talang Buhay worksheet. We're going to brainstorm life events and people who inspire you and a bunch of other things. We're going to have one of these every unit. You can see that there's some worksheet assignments, like I just mentioned, podcast episodes, there might be videos, there might be reflections, there's a presentation, a mastery check, all the way until the unit is completed. And I'll give you that deadline, so make sure you listen. I hope that overview was helpful in giving a thorough rundown of how learning operates with Mr. B. If you have any questions, you can ask a friend first, and then if you still need help, come find me. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.